along the way, what I've discovered is I'm very passionate about solving complex real world problems. I like to take a multidisciplinary approach. It's not just tech. It's not just creative or design. It's not just anything. It's everything together.
Badasses in Tech is brought to you by Growth Stack Media. If you're looking to scale your business affordably through public relations, video production, or podcasts, we've got you covered. Visit growthstackmedia.com to get in touch today. All right, everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Badasses in Tech. Today, I'm joined by Laura Stringer. Laura is a product management expert and currently the principal consultant of 9/4, which is a company all about helping software executives accelerate growth. Throughout Laura's career, she's worked with early-stage startups, 100-year-old global enterprises, and just about everything in between across multiple industries. So she truly is a badass in tech. So, Laura, we are so happy to have you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. Why don't we go ahead and start with, what do you think got you started on such an impressive career path?
Well, my career is really this twisty story of discovering what I enjoy doing and what I'm really good at and how I can bring it all together. When I went to college, I was a computer science major at first. I really thought that's what I wanted to do. And right away, I decided I don't want to write code for 16 hours a day. That's not for me. So I switched majors and I wound up in what was honestly kind of a product management degree back when that kind of thing didn't exist yet. It was a lot of computer science, business, project management, psychology, all these different things. I did usability research. And then on the side, I did freelance and agency web design and development just to pay the bills.
Nice.
And I got really into that and kind of wanted to do that. And then I graduated and 3 days later started my first job in the corporate world.
There you go.
Way too long there. I was in IT and marketing departments. I ran server environments, internal product, flagship, major global website, sales enablement, like you name it. I did it.
Wow.
But there was always something missing. I was always kind of doing half the job I wanted. The corporate world is very much about staying in your lane. I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
So I got scolded a lot. And eventually I realized I needed to get out of there. It wasn't the right environment for me. And so that was when I started 9/4, which is an independent consulting practice. And along the way, what I've discovered is I'm very passionate about solving complex real world problems. I like to take a multidisciplinary approach. It's not just tech. It's not just creative or design. It's not just anything. It's everything together. And I've always had a really strong growth mindset. So I want a challenge. I want to see how much more I can do. And so product management is the perfect role for someone like that, because you're always finding and solving problems. You're integrating across disciplines and talking to lots of different kinds of people. And there's always more to learn.
Yeah. My background's in PR, marketing. So a lot of my best friends in that world, and to help me be ultimately successful with what I'm doing, are those product managers. And the work that I've seen, talk about a role that wears a dozen hats, right? Can you talk a little bit about product management just kind of as a discipline for folks who may be interested in something that's super challenging, but maybe not fully aware of what exactly product management means?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a little bit of a mystique around product management. People think it's a very sexy, glamorous type of field. And I guess some days it is, but behind the scenes, it's a lot of sausage making. We're kind of the people who make the sausage, right? So, you have engineers who are architecting a product. They're figuring out what technologies to use. They're writing the code. They're doing all of that stuff. You've got visual designers who are making it look great. They're making the flows work well for users, all of that. Someone has to bring that all together. Someone has to be talking to customers or users or investors and really figuring out what the thing should do and where we need to take it. And that's ultimately what a product manager does. Having said that, there's a lot of different kinds of product managers. So some of us are very, very technical and will actually be writing code and doing data science work. Some of us are very, MBA business focused. They're crunching dollars and cents all day long. And then there's folks like me who are more, I don't want to say generalist because it makes us sound like jack of all trades, but, really user and customer focused and obsessed and want to build something that's going to be really, really useful and take customers forward and still take the business forward. And you're absolutely right about wearing lots of hats. It definitely takes a very certain type of personality to do this work. You kind of have to have ADHD or something like that. I've seen a lot of folks burn out because 9 o'clock in the morning, you're talking to the engineers and you're looking at technical documents. And then at 10 o'clock, you're looking at designs. And at 11 o'clock, you're talking to users who are talking about their day-to-day life. And so you're all over the place in a single day.
It's not for the faint of heart, based on what I've observed. And you have to be good with people. So I have 2 questions for you. What would you say are some of the skills, or maybe it's like a mindset that somebody in the product management field, and let's just say that the customer base or kind of that voice of the customer route, you described 3, but the one that you're most familiar with, what would you say somebody in that role, like what would they need to have to be successful?
Well, you nailed it with people skills, right? You have to be able to talk to people, but also hear them and really listen to them and understand what they're saying and also get at what they really need. So users will tell you, I want a box that's blue. And your job is to figure out, why does the box need to be blue? It probably doesn't. They're probably trying to solve something else. So you have to figure out what that something else is. And, sometimes that just takes a little bit of intuition to do that. You are sometimes delivering not the best news. We couldn't our dates, or we're not going to be able to implement that for you. So how do you say no in a way that doesn't make everyone hate you?
Right.
Product managers, even those who are individual contributors and their role isn't officially a people leader role, we're all leaders. Like, our job is to rally everyone together. And so, those people skills are absolutely crucial. And you can't be an expert in every field, obviously, and we don't have to be, but we do have to know a little bit about kind of everything.
Yeah.
And be able to talk to the people who are experts in those areas and kind of know where our knowledge stops and where we should let someone else take over.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think in many roles and outside of product management, especially younger professionals, students who might be thinking about joining the field, when you are kind of starting out, at least in my experience, you don't really know where that line crosses. You don't really know how to express a boundary or push back a little bit. So can you describe how you go about, or how you, maybe it's how you help your clients really identify where that line is between, here's where I come in and here's where you can politely go find somebody else to talk to, or maybe, this sounds like this is actually more in your wheelhouse. So I'd love to hear some of your experiences with that.
So in general, if someone comes to me and says, we need a whole new UX architecture or design, I will help them find a great UX person to work with.
Right.
Because again, UX is something I know about. I used to do UX design. I can certainly assess if a product has good user experience and good customer experience across the board, but I'm probably not the best person to design your product for you. So
Sure.
Anything technical, typically I want to bring in a technician and specifically a specialist on whatever their technology is a lot of times. So though, again, I can look at it and if there's any glaring red flags, I'll notice them. But before I get into the details, there is so much to know in that field that I can't. And that is where I absolutely love to partner with a great engineer, a great tech lead, a great architect. Those wind up being my best friends. There's this weird concept that product and engineering butt heads a lot. And I guess sometimes they do, but I've never had that problem. I will have debates with engineers. Sometimes we don't agree, but at the end of the day, we're partners and we're just trying to make the best product. So why not work together? So there's definitely an art and a science in product management in general. And that's one of the artsy pieces, is just knowing what am I comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with? Having the courage to say, I don't know this. I have to go ask somebody else. right?
Right.
So,
And that's totally fine. I feel, yeah, going back to my experiences, and I'm sure others might feel the same fear of admitting they don't know something. But I've found that it's admired. It's admired when somebody is kind of open and honest. Hey, you know what? I don't know the answer to that right now, but maybe when we meet tomorrow, I'll be able to have a better idea. Or I love what you're alluding to of having partners and making sure that you're constantly collaborating with people who know things that you don't know. It's so important to know, okay, what are my strengths? Also, what do I love doing? What do I want to spend my time doing? And what doesn't bring me joy? What doesn't really fuel my battery? Once you have an understanding of those factors, it's a little easier to, okay, well, this is the stuff that I need to tap a friend for, or this is the stuff that I need to make sure that we're bringing in a consultant, or we're bringing in an expert in this particular area. So I think that's so important. And for some reason, we have this, I don't know if it's an embarrassment or a fear, but I find we're quick to say yes and not as quick to say no.
We are, and I think there's definitely a culture in business of needing to seem like an expert all the time, and people will go, oh, you're not good enough if you don't know everything. But honestly, in tech, there is too much. No one can know everything, right? No one can be an expert in all of it, not even a little bit. And so we really need to rely on each other to be the experts where we are experts. And what I'm really good at is tying it all together. So I need other people to be the experts. You know, you can be the engineer, you can be the designer, you can do the marketing, all of this stuff. And my job is to figure out how it's all going to fit together the right way.
I think that what you just said, I got a little bit of a relief, right? Of, you know, tech is an industry where you're not expected to know everything. And I'm sure for folks listening who are interested in pursuing a career in tech, maybe they're taking a breath of relief knowing that, because I feel that as well. I mentioned I'm in PR marketing. So again, working very closely with those engineers, with those subject matter experts. And I felt comfortable and safe to be able to say, listen, I know how to tell a story, but I'm going to need you to explain what this product does as if I'm like 5. I don't know. And I find that when I am vulnerable in that way and kind of open myself up and say, listen, not for nothing, but you could be speaking a completely different language right now. I need you to translate this to me in a different way. And it makes people laugh. You also get a little bit more insight, like honest insight from those experts when you're putting those walls down and really coming from an authentic place.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lot just asking questions of people. It's a great way to build relationships too, which is part of my job. And, you know, sometimes you do have to jump in a place where you're not 100% comfortable, but there's seriously no one else. And so you're the product manager. It's on you. Figure it out. And I'm not going to lie. Last year, I had to like dust off some old Excel macro skills and write up some like little mini programs to do some data and because nobody else on the team was doing it and it had to get done.
Right.
So I love to be able to jump in here and there, but you do not, like, I should not have been writing code. That was a breakdown in the project.
Right. And being able to, after things are said and done, having a retro or having some sort of debrief and going back and saying, hey, here's all the things that worked out great. Maybe next time we do this, let's make sure we have somebody that can fill this gap. Because you don't want, you know, people could joke about it to like lighten up the situation. Like, do you really want me to be writing that? Or do you really want me to be designing that? So it is always nice to take inventory as you're going through, identify what worked, what we should change for next time, and coming together, you bringing those folks together and let's just chat. What was everyone's favorite part of that? What got people really excited? What was a little sticky? What gave folks some heartburn? And I find a lot of times those crucial conversations are glossed over. It's like, on to the next. Let's go.
Super important. And, you know, the Agile methodology builds that in, but not every team does it consistently. And when you do it consistently, you also have to follow through on the things you said you would change. And that doesn't always happen. But yet, retros or postmortems, all of those kinds of retrospective conversations where we look back on what we were doing. Those are some of my favorite things to do because that's how you correct the process.
Right. It's how everyone learns together. And especially, I'm just thinking back when I've worked really, really closely with those product managers. Everyone learns. Everyone has a chance, whether it's the marketing department, the engineering department, finance, the HR team, whoever's involved. When you have that opportunity to collaborate with such diverse people and backgrounds and skill sets, you can't help but to, the way that they're doing that, I've never thought to do that. I'm going to try that for my discipline. I'm going to put that and see if that will work for my project and my role. Or, that didn't go over well. That conversation, this is awkward. I'm going to make sure I don't bring that up. Or, so it is a really great opportunity for everybody to learn.
Absolutely. Product it's part art and part science. And the science is, here's how to use this framework. Here's how to do this methodology. And that's what you find in most of the certification courses, the books, those kinds of things, because there's sort of a clear-cut answer. And the art is understanding, okay, we implemented this framework and it's not doing what we needed. Now what? Yeah, how do you change it? How do we fix it? Do we need to do something completely different or do we just need a little tweak? And there's a lot of that kind of stuff that just comes with experience.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question about the product management discipline, and then I'd love to talk a little bit about your transition from, you mentioned you had a stint in the corporate world and you founded your own company. So I'd love to dig into that experience in a bit. But just based on what we're talking about, and you mentioned there was a few, colleagues, everyone gets burnt out and at some point in time, right? But what would you say for folks who are super into pursuing a career path in this field? What are some tips that you would give for them to maintain, a healthy work-life balance, knowing that there's so much involved in a product management role?
Yeah, that is really tricky. And part of the reason it's tricky is because there are companies out there, and they're typically early to growth stage startups that will expect, huge amounts of work. Some startup founders are great and they totally understand what product management is and why it's useful. Others don't, and they kind of expect their PMs to be a miracle worker, which we are not. Well, okay, sometimes we are. But that in itself creates a lot of burnout just because you're being worked to death and no one can do that because we're human beings.
Right.
But in general, some folks do well with like time blocking. Like today, I'm going to do all of the technical stuff, and tomorrow I'm going to work more on messaging to stakeholders and things like that. Sometimes it's just about you need to leave and get up and go for a walk or something like that, which is super common. It's like really cliche advice to give, but it can be helpful. You have to just get up and change your scenery, change your whatever. And I think the most important thing is just to recognize when you're starting to get that burnout and starting to work a little too hard and, maybe do too much context switching or whatever. And then you can hopefully identify what it is that's bringing you down and address it. But I know it's different for everyone. And a lot of it, folks, is the context switching is just a lot.
Yes.
That's why I said I think it just, you have to have the right personality for it.
Right.
But if you don't, you're going to have to be really, really rigorous and defend your calendar and really set those boundaries with folks.
That's good advice. And I think, the walking, it's so easy, kind of like what we said. It's such a fast-paced environment, and it's easy for folks to kind of gloss over those basic foundational things. Oh, we're on a deadline. I got to get this presentation over to the analyst or the executive. I'll eat lunch after I'm done. And then before you know it, it's 4:00, you're starving, you're on the verge of tears, and you also didn't get a walk.
And look, we all have days and months like that. It happens. You really can't keep that pace for more than a few months. You'll lose your mind. So sometimes you have to get something out the door. There's a launch coming up, whatever. You do what you have to do, but you really do need to take a break after that.
Absolutely. Use that PTO if you have it. Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you haven't already, why don't you take a second to click follow or subscribe on the platform you're tuning into so that you won't miss a second of Badasses in Tech. Also, if you're really loving what you're hearing today, why don't you drop us a 5-star review or leave us a positive comment, as it really helps the podcast grow and helps us continue doing what we're doing, which is helping people become a badass.
Exactly. Or just tell everyone, I'm not doing much this week.
All right.
Don't expect me to respond to your emails.
Yeah. So transparency, right? And you alluded to that as well with the blocking of the calendar, not only for the individual, hey, on Monday, I'm going to do the messaging, and then on Tuesday, I'm going to work through some of the demo calls, but also with your peers and with others. Put a block on from 12 to 1. This is lunch. Like, do not talk to me until after. Or if it's an absolute emergency, something better be on fire. But having that transparency with others, don't touch this time. Or, hey, we just got through this big launch, so next week I'm going to spend a bulk of the time going through my inbox. Or, hey, I'm going to assign myself no meeting Monday for the rest of the quarter.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I want to mention is that because a lot of people don't fully understand what product is and is not, is product managers often tend to get assigned a whole bunch of work that they shouldn't really be doing. And that will absolutely drive the burnout, because now you're doing your job and some other job. And that is a tricky situation to manage, especially if you're very young and new to the field and you don't know that you shouldn't have to do this. But also because there may not be anyone else to do it. And so we do end up being garbage collectors a little bit sometimes. And so that's where you really need to be very, very aware of that and set the boundaries and push back and say, hey, I will do this for a month, but this is not my job. And, and that's a tough conversation to have, but it'll save your sanity.
I love that. Yeah, it's recognizing. And again, being clear, being open. I'll do this for X amount of time, but just know that this does not fall into my wheelhouse. And if we continue doing it this way, it's going to be unsustainable and it's going to start negatively impacting the team, the company, the product. You can't do that with everything. We all have responsibilities and things that we absolutely need to do. So for sure, you got to do what you need. But I always like to talk about like a gut feel. And sometimes your gut's just like screaming, like, this isn't what you should be doing. Or should we push the launch date back? Or do we need to do it in 2 weeks? What's the right decision? Well, maybe the person who's being asked shouldn't be making that decision. So are you feeling like crunchy in your stomach? Are you starting to sweat? Like, use that as an indication to say, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable with this at the moment. Maybe we need to talk to somebody else. Or can we pick this back up tomorrow? It sounds like we all need to do a little bit more research. Doesn't sound like we're all on the same page. So I love that advice. Outside of what you just shared, do you have any other kind of tips or ways for folks who may find themselves in that tricky conversation, how to handle it?
I think it's always best to come at it from the perspective of what is best for the product, the customer, and therefore the business, right? If you've got a management team, some leaders are phenomenal. And if you just say, hey, I'm hurting, I've got too much on my plate, they'll handle it. But a lot of them, they're just looking at the bottom line. And so in those cases, you really want to come at it from, look, I understand this work needs to be done.
Right.
Here's why it needs to be done. I get that. But here's what's happening. Here's what's falling off. Here's the corners we're cutting. Here's all of the things that maybe we're not going to hit such great quality, or we might be delayed. We're going to hit problems. Sometimes you don't know what the problem's going to be, but you just know something's going to blow up at some point, and we don't want that to happen. And so you can then kind of make your case of like, look, you really need to solve for this problem. This is your job as the manager, the leader, whoever.
Right.
I'll keep doing it, but things are going to suffer.
Right. And you're mentioning a good point too. Coming to those conversations with as much information, the argument, right? The proposal, or you're not just going to that person and saying, oh, I have a problem. It's like, I have a problem and here's a potential solution, or here's a few solutions. Help me with this. So I think that's important to note as well.
Yeah, I spoke to some folks earlier this year. I just kind of did an office hours and said, ask me your product questions just to see
Fun.
what kind of questions people had. And it kind of made me sad how many people I spoke with who really, I just wanted to say like, okay, put me in touch with your CEO. I need to explain some things to them because the problem was not their problem. It was their executive's problem. Just having had those conversations and not responding the right way, in those cases are very, very tricky because sometimes it's just out of your hands.
Right. So is that what kind of sparked your passion and interest in Ninth Fourth?
Yeah, it was partially that. For me, it was almost kind of the opposite. It wasn't that I was being asked to do too much. It was that I was being asked enough. And I would ask for more work, or I would ask to join some other project that looked interesting, or I would ask to work on a specific product that looked cool. And the answer was always kind of like, no, we just need you over here doing this thing. Or like, why can't I do these two things together? And it would be like, we don't think you're quite ready for that. And I'd go, why don't you let me try?
Right.
Let me show you.
Give me the opportunity.
Yeah. So it was a little bit stifling.
Sure.
And these were like massive Fortune 500 type enterprise organizations in traditional industries. So they were you have your little narrow lane, you have your box, you stay in your box, and that's it. And like I said, I don't do well in one lane. So I just had to get out of there. It wasn't quite the right environment for me.
Yeah. So what was that process like starting your own company? Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. So starting a company is fabulously easy. You go to the state, you give them a little money, you say, I want a business. And they go, okay. And then started a company. There, you're done. Everyone can do it. Starting a company that makes money is a lot harder. And I didn't quite realize that. So I look back and laugh at myself because when I started, I did that process of creating an LLC. I set up a website and I went out on LinkedIn and I said, okay, I'm consulting now.
Yeah.
I sat back, waited for the work to roll in.
Right.
And that's hilarious because that's not how anything works, right? So what I usually say is I learned more in my first 2 or so years consulting than I learned in almost a decade before that.
Wow.
And that was largely because I had to learn so much that was not product management, right? I had to learn everything about business development, creating a sales process. I didn't know you need a sales process. What even is that?
All right.
So all of these different things, some of them I knew a little bit, like I knew a little bit about marketing strategy, right? But I didn't know how to apply it to what I do. And then, of course, in working with so many different companies and organizations, I've also gotten to learn all the fascinating ways that different teams run different kinds of products. And so I just have so much more exposure to the world now, which was a little bit scary and overwhelming at first, but I'm so glad I did it. Like my whole thing is everything that I'm really, really proud of in my life is something I was very scared of going into it. This was one of those things.
Absolutely. How did you keep pushing yourself through the fear? And how did you know what the results were on the other side? Because I feel like the biggest kind of hindrance for, speak for myself again. Like, oh, I would love to do that, but I'm scared. What if it doesn't work out? Do I know what I'm doing? I could imagine there's a lot of opportunity for self-doubt to creep in.
Absolutely. And you do absolutely need to have a plan for what if it doesn't work out, right? And, you need to have some kind of safety net. And so it's not something that everyone can do, unfortunately. But I still don't know what it looks like on the other side, right? I still don't feel like everything is really stable. And I know, I have a clear view to the future. I'm still kind of taking it day by day, but definitely looking up. I've learned, so much. I mean, when I started, I had to take a class to learn how to do networking. So like everyone tells you to do networking and they don't really explain what it is. So if
what
you're
is
shy,
yeah,
exactly. If you're like shy and socially awkward and nobody ever explained this stuff to you, what do you do? And really what it is just making business friends and staying in touch with them. That's really all it is. But I had to practice. I had to go to networking events and like talk to people and figure out what to do and all of that. And so that's been a real learning experience. It's another one of those things I'm proud of. Networking comes very naturally to a lot of people, but I had to work hard at it. So
yeah, it's definitely an art. And like you're saying, it's not something that you can go learn about in school. I mean, maybe you can now, but it's not something that just comes naturally, and you have to do it right. It's not just, hey, I'm Summer, and have you checked out the lunch place down the street?
yeah, exactly. It's making friends with strategy.
Right.
It's a little bit odd and it feels a little unnatural at first until you realize like, oh no, everyone expects this. I'm not being rude. This is what we're here to do, and it's fine. And then some of those people do actually become genuine friends, which is also very cool.
Yeah, that's the rewarding side of it, right?
Yeah. But other than that, it's kind of a fake it till you make it situation. And I don't mean fake that you're good at what you do. I mean fake the confidence, right? And eventually you get a couple successes under your belt, and then you get real confidence, and that's when
it's like celebrating those little milestones or those little steps. And I love what you said. Every day you're still kind of working to that thing. I think that's a common misconception. And I also love how you broke down like, yeah, it's easy to start a business, but starting a business that makes money, that real business, that's the hard part. Right. So what would you say if for some of our listeners who are thinking about maybe starting something on their own or taking something off the ground, it sounds like learning as much as you possibly can. If you think that you know everything, you don't. Even if it's something as simple as go learn how to network better. It sounds like networking is another kind of key critical ingredient of success. What are some others, would you say?
So networking for sure. And in order to make that networking really effective, you want to have good positioning. So if you're in marketing, you understand positioning. But for anyone who doesn't, it's basically just coming up with how do you define who you are or what your company does, and how do you tell people about it? Why are you so good at this? And how are you different from everyone else? And that's something that is very challenging to do, even for me today, because you want to be available for everyone, right? So I want to say, I can provide product management services to anyone at all, any software product, I can manage it. And that's probably true, but that's not going to get me any business. What gets me business is to say, I work with B2B SaaS companies and PE firms and traditional companies making a pivot into tech. And I focus on B2B, B2B2C. And so then when I'm talking to people and networking, now they have ideas in their head. And I've had people say like, oh, I know a company that I should hook you up with. Whereas if I just go, I can do whatever, nobody knows what I am, and they don't know who to match me with. So it's almost counterintuitive because you feel like you're shutting out opportunity by getting specific. But really what it is you're helping people identify when they should send you referrals.
That is such a great point. And I see a lot. I mean, unfortunately, we're living in this world where layoffs are a very real thing, very common. Outside of that, we're dealing with people who are burnt out and maybe trying to take a new leap or trying to transition their career journey. And I see a lot of times on LinkedIn or social or whatever, people are posting, I've been laid off, or I'm looking for my next gig, and here's everything that I'm good at. And they'll list marketing, accounting, design, almost too general. And
you're not an expert at all of those.
Right. It's like, take a second to identify your niche, or like you're saying, when you are able to narrow the scope a little bit, B2B, it gives other people flags of, okay, well, if this person is a B2B expert, well, then I'm not going to put her in touch with a consumer person or a consumer client. Or if this person is saying straight up that they are really great at design, then I'm probably not going to want to call them for accounting. And yeah. And like you're saying, that maybe everyone can do everything, but do you want to? Like, do you actually want to be called on to do something in design when really you're good at product management? You know, so I can see where having the understanding and kind of knowing that person's strengths, maybe where they need to lean on that other expert like we were talking about, I could see where that's vital as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you can know about all of those things, right? I know about marketing and accounting and, a design and everything else, but I wouldn't take a job as a marketer or an accountant. Those are parts of my day-to-day job that I do here and there, and I can handle them. But if I ever really wanted to do a serious marketing push, if my business finances ever got really complicated, I have to hire people to help.
Yeah.
I can't do that. And
Right.
And to your point, I wouldn't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's another good point too. Don't be afraid to hire somebody who knows something better. I find that a lot of times people are like, well, I can do it. I'll just do it on my own. There's no need to hire anybody. That's a waste of money. And then they're burnt out, or the quality of the thing that they're working on isn't really hitting the mark, or maybe it's not even going anywhere worse, like worst case scenario. And then they're looking back and saying, maybe I should have hired somebody. Maybe it was worth the X amount of money to get this done the proper way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough line sometimes. It's also hard if you're just starting out and you're on a very limited budget and you think,
Right.
I don't want to give $3,000 to an accountant. I'll figure it out myself. But you may end up spending $10,000 of your time doing it.
Right.
So it's really tricky to balance that sometimes. But sometimes you also have no choice. If you seriously don't have the $3,000, you got to take the time.
Got to roll up the sleeves. But yeah, if you can, investing in the things that you absolutely need will pay off in the end. And back to the networking piece, because like I said, really trying to give some advice, give some tactical tips for those who are, trying to find their next thing or entering the market. We're talking about networking. You mentioned for folks who maybe might be a little bit on the introverted side, or it doesn't come naturally to them. I'm assuming you said that because you might fit in that camp, or you might see yourself in that camp.
I'm terrible at that stuff. I've gotten better at it, but it does take a lot out of it. So one of the very few good things that came out of COVID was there is a lot more virtual activity now. So if you are a little bit shy about going into a networking event full of strangers, you can often find some things online. They aren't always quite as good, but you get a lot of practice that way. You can also, like what I did before I found the groups where I was really going to meet the right kinds of people, I just kind of threw everything out there. And I would go to Chamber of Commerce events, where none of those people even know what product management is. They don't understand. They're they're your local banker, your realtor, your hairdresser, those kinds of folks that are serving the very local community. But they're going to talk to you and they're going to be really nice and friendly. And it gets you a little bit of practice. You come out there feeling like, oh, that wasn't so bad. People were nice to me. And then you know what kinds of questions people are going to ask, so you can come better prepared next time and those kinds of things. I got absolutely nothing out of those events business-wise, but I got a little bit better at just walking into a room and saying hi to people, which for some of them hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So try to practice and look for ways to engage virtually if it's an option, but no matter what, just put yourself out there and try to have those conversations.
Yeah. And there are online communities, obviously, for all kinds of different things. So there's product management communities. I just found one focused on AI that I just joined and met 2 people out of there. And these are things that are all on, they're on Facebook, they're on Slack. There's probably some in Discord. There's some in other platforms. They can take a little while to find, but when you find them and join them, now you've got, this whole community full of people. They may do an in-person event, or they might do a virtual thing, or you can just reach out to people one-on-one and say, hi, let's talk.
Yeah. I have a few Slack ones as well, and they have been so valuable just for even bouncing ideas. Has anyone heard about this particular event, or does anyone know who is the gatekeeper for XYZ? So it's very, very helpful. And like we're talking about with technology and software, might as well take advantage of it. Use what's out there.
Yeah. And a lot of them are free.
Yeah. What are some other tips or pieces of advice that you have for job seekers today? As we're kind of wrapping the conversation, what would you say for, aspiring product managers or even aspiring entrepreneurs or founders who are feeling a little stuck right now?
Yeah, it is tough because it's a tough market, like you said. And so the best things you can probably do are to define that positioning, like we talked about, and network to death.
Yeah.
You can apply to 100 jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever. And I don't think you really get a lot of hits back from that. I don't think I've ever gotten a job from an application like that. So that's not to say I won't do it, but be very flippant about it. You don't want to just fire off 500 applications a day. It's a waste of your time.
Right.
So you don't want to do that. But yeah, the networking is really important because then people can kind of connect you to the right other people. And when I say networking, I don't necessarily mean you have to go to a conference and work the room. You can talk to your family, your friends, your people you used to work with, some random person you see on the street, and just make the ask continually. Hey, I'm looking for a job. I do this.
Right.
If you've got accomplishments that line up with what you want to do, you can highlight those. Have a little elevator pitch. It's not just for us salesy types. Those kinds of things. There's like looking for a job and doing sales are actually very similar.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap in the approach you take to it. But it is really hard. I have seen folks lamenting that they've been looking for quite a while with not a lot of good hits. It'll balance out. Hopefully next year. But there was a real big influx of product managers at one point, partly because it was the cool, sexy, prestigious job, and partly because a lot of companies were just doing all this rapid hiring, and it, there was a very definite bubble that had popped. So it'll course correct. It just takes a little time, and that's probably not very helpful for people who need money now.
Yeah, but there's hope, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel for sure. So what's next for you, Laura? We've talked a lot about your history. What's some of your goals from here?
Oh, gosh. My goals are to really just keep doing what I've been doing and refine it a little bit. I had a client for about the last year and a half where I was working with them almost full time for quite a while. So that kind of took me out of the business development mindset. And so I've started to kind of come back in it. So I mentioned the office hours I did earlier in the year. I will probably do that again in a few months because it was a lot of fun. It's a little time consuming, but I really enjoyed doing it.
Nice.
And then I'm just going to keep working my network, keep working my leads, and keep trying to put out some content. I started toying with the idea of making videos, and I don't know that I want to deal with all of that. But I like talking a lot more than I like writing, and consultants are always supposed to have content. So that's probably what I have to figure out next.
Yeah, I know the whole branding, social media, it's a very daunting world out there with every company, every person has to have their own unique brand, the video component, the Q&As, the polls. So yeah,
it's sort of like being an expert in lots of topics. No one can do it all unless you have a big team or an agency that's doing it for you. You can't be on all of those channels. And so you really have to figure out where are the places where I'm going to really be successful and focus on those. And I feel like in the last, not too long is kind of when I figured that out. And I pretty much just focus on LinkedIn now. Yeah. And I won't bother with like Instagram or anything like that, like TikTok. I'm not going to be on TikTok or even Clubhouse. I never really got into.
Yeah.
Because those are all very time consuming channels that like the people that I'm trying to talk to, they're there, but they're not usually there for work. Right. Sure. I want to pick up people when they're thinking about needing someone.
Yeah. LinkedIn is a good place. It's changing a little bit. I will say it's changing, but it's the place for those helpful networking conversations, business leads. And yeah, I follow you on LinkedIn and I have been enjoying some of your recent posts. I saw a fun one that you did about your singing and there was something else. I think it was like an athletic journey. So I love that. It's like you're sharing a little bit more about you.
My little fitness journey. Yeah.
Yeah. See, so you're doing it. You're doing it.
I do my best and I'm also fighting off the burnout, So
yeah,
if you're really good at product management, chances are you want to do everything. And sometimes that extends past work. So yes, the fitness journey is awesome and I love it. Yes, I try to like doodle and draw and color on the side and sing and like do have a creative outlet because I don't really get to do that anymore.
Right.
So you have to get all of those little different touch points covered.
That's a good point too. Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Don't consume yourself so much with work. Make time for the creativity, the connections, the fun, the relationships. It doesn't have to be all work all the time. So I think that's a great piece of advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Laura. It's been awesome talking with you. Before we head out, where can our listeners find you?
So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure if you just search my name, I'll come up, but it's LinkedIn/in/Laura M. Stringer, all one word. And you can, of course, visit my website, which is ninthfourth.com.
Nice. Well, everyone give Laura some love. Follow her on LinkedIn. Check out her page. And again, Laura, it's been awesome talking with you. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Badasses in Tech is brought to you by Growth Stack Media. If you're looking to scale your business affordably through public relations, video production, or podcasts, we've got you covered. Visit growthstackmedia.com to get in touch today.